Hi everyone, it's Sydney, and this is my video presentation on the serotonin transporter protein. So the serotonin transporter protein is also known as SERT, as you can tell by the heading, is a monoamine transporter protein. And the serotonin transporter protein is responsible for the reuptake and reutilizing of the serotonin. I'll explain a little bit more about that as we get more into the presentation, but that recycling and that reutilizing of the protein happens in a sodium-dependent manner. And as you can imagine, the serotonin protein is correlated with affective disorders because of the role it plays with serotonin. So here's some facts about the SERT protein. The gene that encodes SERT is called the solute carrier family 6 member 4. If there are any anomalies associated with that gene, it could cause changes to the serotonin transporter's functioning. There are two variations of the genotype, the short allele and the long allele. There's quite a bit of research done on the short allele versus the long allele, and whether or not those play a specific role in affective disorders. There have been implications, but no indefinite research done on whether the short allele is more prominent with depression or if the long allele is more prominent in depression. Some research does associate the short allele with failure to respond to an antidepressant. So here is a beautiful rendition of a pre- and post-synaptic cell and kind of what SERT and serotonin and their functions are right there. I got the graphic from the Pharmacology Institute's website. Alright, so if you can ignore the SSRI graphic on the SERT graphic, I know it's a little bit blurry, but the SSRI is that little circle on top of that's hooking up to the red rectangle. So the red rectangle is the SERT, and that's what's going to grab that serotonin hanging out there in that extracellular space and bring it back up into the presynaptic cell for recycling and reutilizing. Because of SERT's role here, in controlling the levels of serotonin in the brain, it's looked at with affective disorders. Alright, so again, another picture from the Psychopharmacology Institute's website. But in this case, let's not ignore the SSRI. So SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They are antidepressants, and they essentially are made to block the SERT protein from reuptaking and reutilizing of that serotonin. So they block it, and then that way the serotonin can just hang out in that extracellular space. So I looked at a study done by Matthew A. Meza and his associates on the effects of depression and anxiety in patients with Parkinson's disease. And they specifically looked at the role of serotonin transporters, and more specifically, they looked at both of the alleles. So if you remember from just earlier in the little video, there are two types of alleles, short and long. And they looked at both of these, and they found that the long allele is better and quicker at transcription. And because of this, there is an increase in transporter proteins. So there's more SERT. Well, if there's more SERT, then there is more reuptake and reutilizing of that serotonin, and it's going to get moved around more. But when they looked at the S allele, or the short allele, they found that it was much slower at this transcription process, and it didn't do it as efficiently as the long allele. So ultimately, they found, though, that patients with Parkinson's who suffered from depression all had the S allele, or the short allele. So again, I looked at another study having to do with Parkinson's disease and depression. And in this specific study, they looked at fatigue and Parkinson's disease. So there are a lot of patients who have Parkinson's disease that report disabling fatigue. As I put on the slide, 1/3 of patients report suffering from this debilitating fatigue. And just to be clear, there was never or has never been a clear correlation made between fatigue and Parkinson's, but the researchers think that because of Parkinson's relationship with depression, that could contribute to the onset of this disabling fatigue for patients with Parkinson's disease. And patients with Parkinson's disease just report feeling not only physically exhausted but also mentally exhausted. So in this study, they split up the patients who all had Parkinson's disease into 2 groups. Group 1 having fatigue and Group 2 having no fatigue. They looked at the availability of SERT to see if serotonergic transmission in the pathophysiology of fatigue was playing a role in Parkinson's disease patients with fatigue. They ultimately found that there was a reduction of SERT availability in patients in Group 1, which was the Parkinson's disease with fatigue, when they compared it to Group 2, which was Parkinson's disease without fatigue.